So, let's learn how this thing works. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Music Guide. This is episode 10. Fun. We're on episode 10. That's pretty cool. 2.5 months of doing this, which is longer than I expected to keep going. I'm very bad at keeping these things up. Anyway, this here one's a bit interesting. I just hit the microphone. This one's a bit interesting. One thing I notice about recording music and pretty much anything to do with music, mixing and technology or whatever, is the last thing that you learn that's part of like the main mixing process is compression. Probably because it's a bit more complicated to understand than most other things. Like reverb is just creating like a sense of space. EQ is just turning up and down certain frequencies. But compression, it does something very particular that people say that like it squashes it, which is just a very broad statement for what it actually does. So I thought I would actually spend today trying to explain how compressors work. So today I'm going to be using, which one should we use? I think I just use the regular compressor for Cubase. This is pretty much standard. This is just the standard compressor that you'll always use for this kind of thing. It's just the one, like any software that you use would use this kind of compressor with this exact design, actually, with this little I guess analyzer thing here. I don't even know how to explain it. I'm going to be using a snare drum to explain all these. Main reason for that is that snare drum, this is just a sample snare drum, but snare drums typically they react a certain way to compression that makes it a lot more obvious to hear than other instruments. The reason for that is that they have a main transient, which is just the snap of the snare, and then they also have the tail, sort of the rattle of the snares themselves. So a compressor can actually mess around with these and make tonal changes, not just squash things down and compress. But let me just explain the main fundamental of what compression is. Compression basically takes peaks. So these here guys here, the big peak guys, they basically squash them down to a similar level as the smaller peaks. So these peaks are tiny, so it's kind of hard to see, but like it'll basically take these peaks here, squash them down to their this level if you want to, and then it will take this makeup gain here, and if you turn that there up, it turns the whole thing up together. So it ends up being almost the same level as it was before, but everything is like a similar volume, I guess. But let's just show you what the dry one sounds like. So this is what we're going to be hearing for the rest of the video. Pretty standard. So let's just start with how compression works and like what you need to know about controlling it. Basically there are 4 main controls you need to worry about when it comes to compression. And those are threshold, ratio, attack, and release. And makeup gain, I guess. So 5. But makeup gain is literally just adding volume, so it's not really that difficult to use. These are the 4 that you really need to sort of think about. So let's start with threshold. Threshold is basically the level you set, the decibel level you set, that when the signal goes over that decibel level, that's when the compressor starts to kick in and actually do something. So if say it's set to minus 20 dB here right now, if this signal, for argument's sake, didn't go above 20 dB, it stayed below that, minus 20 dB, sorry, and it stayed below that, it wouldn't trigger this compressor at all. The compressor would be just doing nothing at all. So if you actually look here, you'll see this here is showing that the compressor is doing something because this is going above 20 dB. But if I go way up here, it's doing nothing at all because it's all the way at 0 dB, and this isn't going above that. So yeah, that just shows like the lower you put this down, the lower this has to be in volume before the compressor starts to kick in and do something. So yeah, this does control a lot of the intensity of it, like how much compression is actually applied. Another thing that controls how much compression is applied is the ratio. The threshold and the ratio kind of work hand in hand. The ratio just sets how much compression happens when and if the volume goes above the threshold. So let's say we're back at around 20, and it goes above 20, and we're set right here. We're set to 2 to 1. That's the ratio set. So what that means is for every 1 decibel that it goes above the threshold, it basically compresses by 2 decibels. So there's 2 decibels of gain reduction in turn. So if I turn that up, this actually goes in this actually doesn't go in steps. You can actually do it in points here. But let's say we go to 4 to 1. That means for every 1 decibel it goes above the threshold, it's there's gain reduction of 4 decibels. So it's more intense. And I can probably show you it here. So say if we go down to around 2 to 1 and we play it, so you can see it's going around here, but minus 7.5 dB. But the more I put it up, it's actually reducing by more, and I haven't changed the threshold at all. So it's reducing by a lot more. And the reason why you would probably do this instead of just reducing the threshold is if you only want to affect those higher volume levels, those higher amplitude levels, while still adding a lot of compression. It just gives you that fine control of that. And if you just want to like completely flatten something out, you would just go hard. This actually only goes to 8 to 1. There's some that go a lot higher than that. I have some here that go a lot higher than that, but just for today's purposes, we won't need that. But yeah, they kind of work together to change things. So then we have attack and release. These also kind of work hand in hand with each other, but these actually do more. These actually affect the track more tonally than it will actually affect how much compression is added. In fact, I won't do it at all. So basically the attack sets when the compressor kicks in. So say for example, when the snare is going, I don't want to actually compress the transient here, the big peak, but I actually want to keep the compression going to compress here. So I basically want to still have that big snap, but then I also want that snare to rattle out. The way I would do that is I would set it to a longer attack, so it takes longer for the snare. It takes longer for the compressor to kick in, so it goes snap and then it starts doing something. So it just takes longer to kick in, and then the release is the same in the opposite way. It basically controls on when the compressor stops. And changing these here around will change the tonality of your source. So you need to be careful with these. You can really make or break your track with these, but it also gives you a lot of fun control. But let's mess around with this. I'm actually going to add a little bit of makeup gain so it's a bit easier to hear this. Oops. Don't want to go too high with that. But let's bring this down and add a bit more compression to it. If you hear this, hear how quiet that is, and then you add makeup gain. Alright, so if you can actually hear that, it's a lot more, it's quite a bit more rounded, if that makes sense. So, one second there. So there's sort of less of that transient and more of the rattle. But let's say we want to add a bit more of the transient, so we can just hear that. Let's turn down the makeup again a little bit. Don't need that high. Let's equal it out again. Oh wow. Hear that? I'm almost peaking with just the transient, but hear how low everything else is. Move that attack back again. So much quieter. And then if we take this release, look at that. So what that's doing is it's releasing almost immediately. So the that rattle is actually just, it's basically opening up just before that rattle hits. So it's just exploding out. If you hear it, like if you hear the end of that, massive tonal difference. And then you go like this, tightens it up a lot. It keeps it all similar. So we're at basically the fastest attack setting with the longest release setting, and this just kind of, this is almost like never letting up the compression. It's just as flat dynamically as you can get. Let's open this up a little bit more. If you can hear the differences. Oops. Yeah. So yeah, it can make a big tonal difference on how you work the attack and release. These here are not really that important. These are not as common on other compressors. This just happens to be on the one that Cubase does. It's kind of hard to know when compression is well done or not well done when you're in the moment, like when you're actually doing it, especially when you're only doing it for the first time. Like snare drums in particular are actually quite difficult. Like it just depends on the song. There's no right or wrong answer of what these settings are. So just think about what you're actually recording, what you're actually doing, and then just use these parameters to just get what you want. The key is to know what you want in your own head before you do anything. I'm just sort of giving you the knowledge of how to get where you want to be in the end. But yeah, just remember that, you know, all of these here work together. So these two are kind of a team, and then these two are kind of a team. So you got the intensity of the compressor, and then the tonality of the compressor, and then the makeup gain, just the thing to turn it up, because compression compresses, it turns it down, it compresses the volume down to a lower level. Well, at least some of the, depending on what, you know, what your attack and release settings are, it'll compress some of the audio. So it's always good to put that up, and you always want to match your in and your out, so they're pretty much the same level, so that again, you don't fall into that trap of volume makes it sound better. Honestly, compression isn't all that complicated once you get into it. But I will be doing a few videos later on going over all the fundamentals of mixing, so how EQ works, how reverb works, and then probably getting into more complicated things like side chaining, and even some fun little using like sort of auxiliary outputs and inputs on synthesizers, and things like that, putting instruments through them. Honestly, whatever makes sense in the time and whatever's fun to do. And then eventually I'll probably just do a full mix to show you guys how to work it all together. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much me. If you want to say something, leave a comment. If you liked, leave a like, and subscribe if you have the time. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.